30 plus years, I've seen every type of child grow up.
Instead of giving me what I wanted, she gave me what I needed, which was truth.
Don't let emotions win. Let truth win.
Do your very best, and you should have a lot of fun while you do it. And the better you get at something, the more fun you're going to have at something.
You moms and dads are wired with everything you need to be a parent to a great kid. Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. This is episode number 116, and I'm your host, Dr. Meg Meeker. Today, my guest is Debbie Reber. Before we get into our conversation, I want to tell you a little bit about Debbie. She's a parenting activist, a New York Times best-selling author, a podcast host, and speaker who moved a career in a more personal direction in 2016 when she founded TILT, T-I-L-T Parenting, a top resource for parents like her who are raising differently wired children. Prior to launching TILT, Debbie spent more than 15 years writing inspiring books for women and teens. In doing so, she built a successful brand as a teen authority, was frequently interviewed and spoke about issues like media literacy, self-esteem, and confidence. Since 1999, Debbie has authored many books, including Doable, The Girl's Guide to Accomplishing Just About Anything, Language of Love, and Chill, Stress-Reducing Techniques for a More Balanced, Peaceful You. Debbie's newest book is Differently Wired, Raising an Exceptional Child in a Conventional World. And that's the subject of our show today. Debbie has a master's in media studies from the New School for Social Research and a BA in communications from Penn State University. In December 2018, Debbie and her husband and 15-year-old twice exceptional son relocated back to New York City after living in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, for 5 years. What a life. As always, I will share my points to ponder so you can start using them right away. And remember, parents, don't just download the episodes, click subscribe because I need you to join my parenting revolution. When you subscribe, every new episode will automatically show up in your subscribed list. And we'd love for you to write us a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think about the podcast. Not only are we on iTunes, but the PGK podcast is also available in the Google Play Store and on Stitcher. So no matter where you get your podcast, subscribe today so you won't miss a single episode. Friends, I am so excited. A gentleman in California created something called the Gabb phone, G-A-B-B. Perhaps you've heard me talk about it. The reason I'm excited is this. It's the only smartphone that allows kids to text, call, take photos, use GPS, etc., but not be able to hook up to the internet. Phones are flying off the shelves. And when I heard about this phone, I jumped out of my chair. I'll tell you why. Kids who are younger than 14, even 16, cannot handle having constant access to the internet. Sex abuse, sex trafficking, pornography, bullying are very, very serious problems that I see very frequently in young kids who are on the internet. I really encourage you, parents or grandparents, check out the Gabb phone. You won't have to worry about parental controls because the kids can't get on the internet anyway, and they can't download creepy apps. If you go to gabbwireless.com/Meg, that's gabbwireless.com/Meg, they'll give you a discount, and every phone that's sold, they'll donate $10 to defend the innocent. I want you now to listen in on a conversation I had with Debbie Reber. I know you're really going to enjoy this. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, you have a fabulous book, Differently Wired, A Parent's Guide to Raising an Atypical Child with Confidence and Hope. You know, I was intrigued by the title, and intuitively I went, I know who she's talking about. Because I've seen so many kids over the years. But would you describe what you're talking about as far as an atypical child?
Yes. And I really started using this term differently wired because it felt like it captured so much of what it means to be atypical. And so when I'm talking about our kids who may have a formal diagnosis such as ADHD or autism spectrum, they might be gifted, they might have a learning disability like dyslexia or dyscalculia, they might have sensory processing issues. And then there's also kids who may not even have a formal diagnosis, but there is some way about the way that they learn or they think or they process information that makes some aspect of their life more challenging in school or just getting through day-to-day life, whether it's anxiety or things like that.
When you wrote in the book, and you talk a lot about your own journey with your son, and you talk about those early years when you're just frustrated because is this the way everybody's kid acts? Do they all have temper tantrums like this? Do they all, obsess over this? And how old was your son when you finally realized he's different from most kids?
I think it was 4 when we started realizing, okay, we need to get additional information. So we always knew that he was more, I say he was the more kid. He was more intense. His tantrums were more, he was more verbose, more precocious, so he was just one of those kids that he turned a lot of heads for good and bad reasons from a young age. But when he was in preschool and he was 4, and that environment was really where things started to shine, to show themselves more, the trouble with flexibility or not reading social cues as well, and just getting dysregulated in situations that other kids were better able to handle. And someone suggested, I think there might be something going on here that you'd like to get some more information. But it took us years to really kind of understand who he was, because they're so little. It's hard to know what's really happening.
Yeah. And you took him early on to a lot of different professionals, and he was diagnosed. He had several diagnoses. What were they?
So his initial diagnosis was sensory processing disorder. And then a year later, we got provisional diagnoses of pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, and a provisional ADHD disorder. We also had an IQ test and found he was profoundly gifted. So that's kind of the soup of labels that we played with for a few years. And then we did additional testing a couple years later, got ADHD, autism spectrum. And then we've tested again and found that he didn't meet the criteria for autism, but still the ADHD. So he's a complicated human, and those labels have been helpful for context and to help us figure out kind of plans to support him, but ultimately they didn't provide answers.
Yeah. So it's not as if you wanted a label or a diagnosis, but I think you need to know a diagnosis so that you know what you're dealing with and limitations so that you can live in reality. And I think that's the biggest struggle for a lot of parents. So until he got those diagnoses, or we'll just go through his early elementary school years, what kind of issues came up over and over and over that were a struggle for you and his teachers?
I think the biggest thing was the intensity and the inability to emotionally regulate in situations that were unpredictable, or if demands were placed on him, or the kinds of things that happen in school, the expectations and not being able to do what you want to do, or having to transition when you're really in the middle of something. And because he didn't have those skills to regulate, there would be explosions. And so that was the hardest thing in a classroom setting, certainly. And we saw the same behaviors at home, was just a lot of really big, explosive behavior, probably things that would be brewing all day, and then they would release in a really big way. And so as teachers, it was tricky because they've got a classroom to manage. And as parents, first-time parents, we just felt like we weren't equipped to know how to help this child.
Was there any point where you thought, I'm just a bad parent because most other parents' kids aren't acting this way.
100%. And
it's hard. Yeah.
It's so hard. And, I was reading all the same books, or I would be getting advice from friends who were using this or that parenting philosophy successfully. And I was like, but I'm reading those same books and
they're not working.
They're not working. So yeah, there was a lot of beating myself up, my husband and I feeling, what are we doing wrong? And it's confusing because you get different feedback from pediatricians and teachers. So you really just don't know where to turn.
Mm-hmm. You write in your book that one of your biggest conflicts was trying to figure out, is this what my life should be as a mom? And because I think as mothers, we all compare ourselves to other mothers. And at some point you go, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This isn't how my life as a mom should be. When did you start to reconcile, it's really not about me? This is a situation that he didn't bring on. This is who my son is. And so you really just started to relax and accept it and realize I'm a really good mom. I can't take this personally. Was there a turning point for you there?
Yeah, and we had an unusual situation in that our family relocated and moved abroad because of my husband's work and because we had run through a few schools and hadn't found a successful fit. And so I started homeschooling Asher in third grade. And it was over the course of that year, which was a very challenging year for me personally. And I had to confront a lot of my own control issues and what you were talking about, my own vision for what this should look like, not matching with reality. Mm-hmm. And I started to just see him for who he was and have a deeper understanding of why he hadn't been successful in the past. It was because he had needs that were not being met, plain and simple. And so I just started to flip it around and start focusing on myself and recognizing that he's actually exactly who he is supposed to be. He's not broken. There's nothing wrong with him. And he deserves someone to kind of see him for who he is. And so I kind of started doing this work on myself.
Takes a lot of guts, Debbie. It takes a lot of guts. And I applaud you because I feel like I've met him. I've just seen so many thousands of kids and I look at him, I scratch my head and I think I don't know what to tell you, Mom, to help you here because all the regular stuff doesn't work, and you're spending a lot of time in the principal's office, as you say, babysitters are walking out on you and your friends may be telling you, why don't you just spank that kid? That's what he needs, and you're going, no, this is so far off from what you think it is. So how long did you homeschool him?
6 years, which is shocking to me, but 6 years.
Yeah. So as he got older, you said there were some needs he had that weren't being met. Mm-hmm. What were those needs?
Well, I think he, in a traditional school environment, wasn't able to learn the way he learned. So he is a deep diver. He is a kid who can completely immerse himself and lose himself in really interesting projects. And so even just being able to say, I can see you're really into this right now. Why don't you keep going with that? See where it goes. And I would challenge myself to find ways to teach executive functioning skills or other skills around his areas of interest. So just not having to transition on these arbitrary timelines, right? Mm-hmm. And speaking of timelines, that was another thing, right? We have these expectations for these markers that kids should be doing at these certain ages. And to take that pressure off and say, actually, all kids develop asynchronously and you're way here, you're reading at this level and you're doing all these cool things and tying your shoes, that'll come. That's not a priority right now, or handwriting. We'll work on that. So just not feeling perpetually like he wasn't good enough or that he was always screwing up, which is the message that he got in school.
You really write a profound statement in there, which, boy, I totally get, is that, kids who are differently wired are constantly, they're constantly apologizing, not for what they did, but for who they are. Mm-hmm. And I think they live with a lot of shame because, you can see these things happening in your son, but your son knows he's different. And he knows that people are telling him, you should do this. Why can't you just stop your temper tantrum? Or why can't you this? And he feels probably broken. Did he ever feel like I'm broken? I'm a broken kid?
He definitely felt like he was a bad kid. He identified that way, mm-hmm. for sure. And it took a number of years actually for him to stop apologizing for mm-hmm. things that didn't warrant an apology at all. And it took a while I would say years also for him to really recognize all the strengths that he has and also be okay with these areas of weakness and not think that they're a statement on who he is or that there's something wrong with him, but that actually all humans have strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So, but it is really hard if you're getting that message over and over again, or you're having to apologize, or you're being shamed by a teacher or a camp counselor or other kids. Mm-hmm. That takes a while to kind of deprogram.
Did he develop any significant friendships? How was he socially?
Yeah, it's so sweet. He, in that preschool I mentioned in the very beginning, he befriended a student in the year ahead, and they're still best friends. Aww. They have the deepest relationship. We're in New York now, his friend's still in Seattle, and they Skype weekly for hours. And it's so beautiful. So he actually is a great friend, and he has a good friend that we met when we were living abroad as well.
Can he meet new friends?
Yes, absolutely. He's very open, and one of the reasons why we moved back to the U.S. from our time abroad was to provide opportunities for more social engagement. And so fencing has been a really good opportunity. He's back in school this year, and so he's slowly made some connections there. Mm-hmm. And he does really well with kids, one-on-one kids and he's curious about other kids, and he has a lot to offer, and he knows that.
Wonderful. I'm just curious, is he aware of his surroundings, or does he sort of live in his own head? I've seen kids who really feel disconnected from what's happening all around them, and they miss it somehow. Was he that way or no?
I think he was more when he was younger, definitely. Mm-hmm. More, and my husband would say he was this way too, was that kid who spaced out a lot and was mm-hmm. just very internal.
The kind of nerdy professor?
For sure. I lived with two of them. Young and old.
Yeah, that's right. Comes by it honestly. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But no, he actually, one of the really cool things about the transformation that we had and the way that we've created a connection is that he has gotten out of fight or flight mode, right? Which is what he was perpetually in, as a lot of these kids are. They're defensive, they're shut down. And so they're not open to the world and what's happening around them. And over time and opening up, he has become he's a very empathetic person. He's super tuned in. He's still very cerebral and will still read philosophy late night in his bedroom and wake up in the morning and tell me this or that theory. But he's also he watches current events. He's very tuned into what's happening around him too.
So do you think that you and the help of other professionals as he's gotten older have been, it's important to accept obviously who he is, but have you been able to build on his strengths so that he can function better as an adult? Yeah, absolutely. I think I really encourage parents to look at their kids through that strengths-based lens, because they do. Every child, no matter how they're wired, they have such unique strengths, and we know that that's where the opportunity exists for them to thrive, to create careers, to kind of build a life that's fulfilling to them. And so, again, that I saw that as my job, and we've been lucky in finding really good mentors to support him in his personal interests, is to really help him understand not just what his strengths are, but who he is. Like,
this is who I am. This is what I need. This is how I think. This is where I need to ask for help. And here's how I can ask for help. So I think that has been my job, is to try to foster that self-awareness. And I think that's the best thing we can do for these kids.
I think that's huge, because there are adults I see walking around who are probably very much like your son, but really never had that kind of help. And so they're walking around feeling that they can't do this and they can't do that. They feel their limitations a lot more than they feel their strengths. And sometimes it's hard for them to identify their strengths, because they live with feeling weak all the time. And I was just kind of wondering, if they can be helped. Parents, I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Debbie Reber. We need to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of this conversation. KiwiCo creates super cool hands-on projects designed to expose kids of all ages to concepts in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. KiwiCo's mission is to help kids build confidence, creativity, and critical thinking skills, and a blast while doing it. Each crate is designed by experts and tested by kids, and teaches a new STEAM concept. Each box is delivered monthly and comes with all the supplies needed for that month's project, plus detailed kid-friendly instructions and an enriching magazine filled with content to learn more about the crate's theme. Each line caters to different age groups, and there are a variety of topics. Plus, the crate includes everything you need, so you don't have to worry about running out for extra supplies. Friends, if you've listened to my podcast for even a short period of time, you know I love KiwiCo. I have 5 grandchildren, ages 7 down to 2, and there's a KiwiCo box for every age grandchild. Our grandkids love seeing the KiwiCo boxes come in the mail, land at our doorstep. We open them up and dig in to see what they can learn that day. The fun thing about KiwiCo is you learn, but kids don't realize they're learning because they're having so much fun. With KiwiCo's hands-on art and science projects, kids can engineer a walking robot, blast off a bottle rocket, we've done that, explore colorful, kid-friendly chemistry, and more. Everything you need to make STEAM seriously fun, delivered to your doorstep. Get your first month free on select crates at KiwiCo.com/Meg. That's KiwiCo.com/Meg. Parents, home is where we make breakfast the sweetest part of the day. When you need something delicious to get everyone together, there's Pillsbury Grand's Cinnamon Rolls. Pillsbury Grand's Cinnamon Rolls have delicious cinnamon swirls drizzled with sweet melted icing. They're easy to make, and even the kids can enjoy icing and decorating their favorite cinnamon treats. Friends, I love Pillsbury Grand Cinnamon Rolls. And to tell you the truth, just reading about how you make them and drizzle them with their frosting makes me want to have one right now. We actually give our kids Pillsbury Grand's Cinnamon Rolls on Christmas morning. They're special, they're sweet, and everybody in my house loves them. It's a tradition, and Pillsbury Grand's Cinnamon Rolls always remind us of being together, particularly on Christmas morning. Pillsbury Grand Cinnamon Rolls makes any morning that much sweeter. Grab Pillsbury Grand Cinnamon Rolls at a store near you, and remember to get more because they go fast. Talk to me about, we have an idea of what you did, about how professionals helped you with any kind of behavior modifications, and then talk about medication. Was he ever on medication?
We have never used medication. It had, he knows that it's available for ADHD, and we've discussed it, and I bring it up periodically when he finds himself getting frustrated with distraction, but he really wants to try to find other ways, and I support that. And, I think we've had periodic support along the way. So sometimes it'll be a social skills group, right, which can be really helpful and just kind of better understanding how to be with other people and what a relationship give and take looks like. That's been really helpful. We've, over the years, had different therapies that have focused on executive functioning, which most differently wired kids struggle with.
Have they been pretty helpful?
Yes, although I will say that I think, when a parent finds out their child's differently wired, the instinct is to lump on all of the support right away. And then there's often frustration that this is taking too long, I'm not seeing change. And these are the kind of things that it's planting seeds, and it's work that we continue to do over time, that especially with these kids, there's no flipping a switch. Right. It happens over time with consistency and with the parents playing that role of a coach as well, and helping to bridge the therapy with what's happening at home.
Do you think as he moves into his 20s, will he still have to have some help in coaching? Or do you think that by that time he'll know how to navigate different situations, or transition better, or when he feels overwhelmed with emotion, how to handle it? Or do you think he'll pretty much be there by the time he's in his 20s?
I think so. I mean, what has happened even in teenhood has been tremendous, and which is why he's back in school. He's really just thriving in so many ways, and the growth we're seeing is incredible. So he's got big plans, big plans for university and beyond. And I feel really confident that he's going to be able to make them happen for himself.
Get there if he wants to. Yeah. I mean, these are the people who, change the world. These are the rockers and the shakers and the leaders. And, they make the biggest impact. And yet, they kind of pay a price. Let's talk about you and how you went through that. You say in your book, it was very important for you to connect with other parents and to kind of find a support group. How did you find those women?
Well, I mean, partially I created Tilt Parenting to create the community that I needed. I think that feeling alone was probably the biggest struggle for me. And I think that that's when parents find this out, they often do feel like no one else gets what they are going through. So for me, I did have a close network of friends that I kind of let in, and they were very supportive and helping me vent and letting me cry, or just show up at their house when I need to get out of my house on a bad day. But one of the reasons why I created Tilt was because I don't want other parents to feel that they're alone, because we're everywhere.
You are.
Kids are everywhere, like our kids. So there's no reason for a parent to feel ashamed or embarrassed or worried about talking about what's going on, because we're not in this alone. And so I feel like that's happening. People are starting to be more open and better able to find each other.
Well, I think that's very, very important, because if you are alone or only around people with kids who are not wired differently, there's going to be some tension. You're going to want to kind of hide what's happening. You might be a little bit embarrassed. But I wanted to just sort of stress how proactive you were. Tell us what Tilt is.
So Tilt Parenting is a community that I launched just over 4 years ago, because I realized, that I'm not alone, and parents like me were everywhere. And it's so difficult to know how to navigate a path. And that's not okay. It's overwhelming to think about schooling and support and insurance, and then feeling alone at the same time while dealing with difficult behavior. And so I created Tilt to help parents say, listen, you're actually in a really awesome club here. Welcome to the club. We've got you. We know what you're going through, and to provide really just tangible strategies and resources and access to people that can help their family. So this is what I've done my whole life. I create the resources that I needed that didn't exist when I needed them. And that's what I've done through Tilt.
So you have a PhD in creation.
I guess so. I don't know. I just can't stop myself.
Yeah. Now, you kind of alluded to the fact that your husband's a little differently wired as well. Mm-hmm. Was he able to help? I mean, was he able to have the insight into what's happening to your son? Or was it easier for you because you had a very different personality than they do?
I think it was actually, there was a lot of, I was like that when I was a kid. I turned out fine, right?
Yeah.
From him and from his parents as well. Yeah. So I think that initially created a little bit of tension because I was the one in the trenches, and I'm like, okay, but this is not fine. We need support. We need more information. But it's actually been really great. They're super close. They work on all kinds of creative projects together. And I used to have to mediate a lot because they're very similar. There was a lot of headbutting, but they really understand each other now. And they have a lovely relationship, and because they're so similar, it has been helpful to get some insights during difficult times to talk with my husband. Like, what were you, when you were going through this, what was it like for you and what were you thinking? Mm-hmm.
Well, and in some way, your husband might be a little jealous of your son because he probably didn't get the help when he was a teenager that your son's getting. Was that probably ever an issue or no?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, we were both kids of the 80s, so I don't think many kids of the 80s got much attention. But
yeah.
We certainly parent different than we were parented, for sure.
Yep. Well, yeah, every generation seems like, they were parented very differently. Yeah. So I just wanted to turn the corner a little bit. So with the parents who are in Tilt, is it a national program? So can anybody from Seattle to Omaha join Tilt and get some support there?
Yeah, so I have a podcast, the Tilt podcast, which I've got over 200 episodes, and that's available. And
awesome.
You can source by ADHD, homeschooling, by theme, and find episodes that'll be relevant. And then actually, because it's a podcast, much like your listeners, it's global. And so there is a Facebook group that I've started called Tilt Together. And that is really where people are connecting with each other all over the world. New Zealand, I need an OT. And then people will say, I'm in Auckland. Here's a few suggestions. And so it's a really collaborative, lovely, generous group of parents who are connecting through the Facebook group. But I have tons of resources on Tilt Parenting as well that are free.
Wonderful. So if you could look back, your son's 15 now, and sort of pick the 3 most important things that helped you or people that helped you. I'm thinking of a mom who has maybe a 5-year-old, and she's seeing a lot of signs that maybe you saw, or really struggling with a child who's obstinate or exploding or having temper tantrums or who can't concentrate. And so she's kind of wondering, gee whiz, could this be my child? Mm-hmm. What are the 3 most important things you would tell her to do to get her on the right path?
Well, I would say, first of all, to trust her instinct, because it can be hard to know, is this something, and again, sometimes you get mixed messages from a pediatrician, depending on whether or not the child had a good day when they went in for their appointment. So if you think there's something going on, to trust your instinct, that would be number 1.
Amen. I tell mothers that all the time. Yeah.
We know.
If there's something, if a mother walks into my exam room and says, something's wrong with my child, my job is to figure out what that something is before they leave the appointment, because mothers, I'm a mom of 4 kids, you just know. So, so trust your instincts. And then what?
Then I would say reach out, try to find a mentor, someone who has a child who may be differently wired. It doesn't have to be, it could be any kind of neuro difference, but someone has gone through a journey with their child. That might be someone you find on the Tilt Together page too. And just reach out and say, hey, this is what's going on. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Because it can be hard to decide where you get that support or that evaluation or that assessment. And then the third thing I would just say is to not panic, because I think we instantly go to a place of fear, and we can have our 4-year-old, we can have their whole future written in our mind and think that, all these plans we had for them are not possible. And we have no idea what the potential for these kids are, and they're not broken. They're who they are supposed to be. So don't panic and kind of don't fight what's going on, and instead get really curious about, okay, who is this kid? Move slow, be curious, and take it one thing at a time.
And I love what you said about, don't take on, how was the term? I don't know, don't dump too much stuff on it first, or, don't, start with OTPT, psychiatrist, psychologist, because it's overwhelming, and I would think it would make you panic even a little bit more, because you're waiting for something to change really fast. It doesn't change fast.
No, I mean, we have to try on the long game here, and there's so much time. So we need to manage our energy, right? So we're not getting ourselves burned out by running them around like crazy, to different appointments, and also making them feel like, oh my gosh, something must be really wrong with me if I'm doing all of these things right now.
Right. So was your son able to participate in a lot of the things that other kids did? Soccer, basketball, chess club, things like that?
Yeah, he was in soccer when he was younger, and cross country. Soccer, there was a lot of standing on the field and kind of doing his own thing. But he participated in many camps. Certain things that were game oriented, games were really difficult and could be really dysregulating. So we tended to avoid things that might get him dysregulated. But for the most part, he's, with very careful selection and some prep with the counselors or organizations, he's been able to participate in a lot of those things. So what does the future hold for your son? Well, as I said, he really has very big plans, and he's got his eye. We were actually supposed to visit some universities before the whole country shut down. Oh, wow. So he's very interested in engineering. And he's in ninth grade. Yeah, he's kind of keeping his eye on what he wants to do. So aerospace engineering is his field he wants to go into. And I think it's totally possible. And I'm super curious. And the joke around here among my sister and my husband and I is that we look forward to him having like a little house on his estate where we can grow old and he can take care of us. Yes, indeed. It's got to switch, that, yes. Okay, I've done my part. Now we switch it over and it's your turn. I mean, that's so exciting. And just in final thoughts, as kids get older, do they have any difficulty? What are the biggest challenges that you think young men and women who are differently wired will have as they get older? Can you say or no? I think one of the hardest things is the launch and the expectations. And what I've heard anecdotally and talked with a lot of people about is that for kids who do move on to college, a lot of them, even if they've had accommodations in high school for testing or more time or whatever for their learning disability, they don't want that anymore. They don't want to be different, or they don't want to advocate for themselves. And a lot of them struggle with that first year of college because they don't want to be different. And then they end up not getting the support they need. So I feel like a lot of our work with high school students is to really help them own who they are and know how to ask for what they need. Difficulty with jobs? Are there any special issues they may have with certain jobs? Because I know people with ADD can, it can be a struggle for them because they'll get so intense on one thing and they forget to do other kinds of things. Or do they kind of outgrow that? Yeah, I think some things they can outgrow, or they can just kind of learn skills to manage things that could be challenging for them. I think it's important for people to choose careers where they can be in their zone of competency and be okay for who they are. And of course, we know that there are a lot of companies like Microsoft and Hewlett Packard and some big companies that are actually recruiting people on the spectrum to work for them because of the attention to detail and the skills that they bring to certain tasks. And so I do see a big shift coming in terms of neurodivergence being better understood and better supported in workplaces.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm so glad, we talked about that, because that's one of the things I've seen as kids get older and they move into their 20s. And, if they haven't been trained and they haven't been supported well enough, sometimes they'll go into jobs and it's like they hit a brick wall and go, what is happening? Life is suddenly very different. The book is Differently Wired, and the author is Debbie Reber. And this has just been a fabulous, fabulous interview. And I've learned so much from you. You're the founder of Tilt Parenting. So how can people connect with you, learn more about the work that you do?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm a fan, and so I was very excited to be invited.
Well, it goes both ways. I read your book and I thought, I got to get her on here.
Oh, that's awesome. So Tilt Parenting is kind of my home. So you can email me through there, or you can connect with me on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, all at Tilt Parenting. And I'm fairly responsive. Yeah, I'm pretty responsive. Not as fast as I could be, but yeah.
I bet you're a busy gal. And I really want to encourage parents out there to do what Debbie said. Trust your gut. If you think that something's a little off with your son or daughter, don't just wait. Be proactive. Figure it out. Don't feel that if you dig and try to find what's there, you're going to be betraying your child or making things happen. Because I think sometimes we do that. But I would strongly encourage parents to go to Tilt and to try to figure out if there's something you can do for your child. So I'm going to sure send parents there. I can think of people right off the top of my head that I'm going to send to Tilt. So Debbie, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a great conversation.
Now on to my points to ponder. 1, expect possibility, not limitation. One of the most common mistakes parents of children who are unlike their peers make is that they limit the child's abilities. They limit their expectations of the child. They quickly think of the things that the child can't do instead of what he can do. As you learn about who your child really is, focus on his or her possibilities. This will not only give him confidence, but it will improve your relationship with him because he learns that you believe in him. 2, be okay with parenting him differently. Parents try hard to treat each of their kids fairly, and I get this. They often think that this means parenting them the same way. But the truth is, we don't do this. Not because we're bad parents, but because every child's needs are different. With a child who's wired differently from many kids, this is especially true. You must accept that how you parent him will be dramatically different from how you parent your other kids or how outside kids are parenting. And that's a good thing. 3, get support. One of the toughest issues parents face is feeling inadequate and worrying that they're doing something wrong. The best thing they can do for themselves and their child is to find another person with a similar child and ask for help. Many parents with the same struggles can offer great tips, particularly if they're older than you are. Since parenting a child who is different from others offers emotional and physical stresses, find someone you can turn to for emotional support. Parents, while I'm not going to be able to answer parenting questions on my podcasts anymore, what I am going to do is answer your questions in podcasts devoted just to answering your questions. I love answering them, so please keep sending your questions in to me. No question is off limits. Email me your parenting questions to askmeg@megmeekermd.com. Again, that's askmeg@megmeekermd.com. And while I'm at giving you addresses, I'm going to give you the Gab phone address one more time, gabwireless.com/Meg. I want to thank my guest, Debbie Reber, for joining me on the show today. To find out more about Debbie, go to Debbie Reber, DebbieReber, DebbieReber.com. That's DebbieReber.com. Be sure to follow Debbie on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. And I strongly recommend that you read her brand new book, Differently Wired: Raising an Exceptional Child in a Conventional World. So let's recap my points to ponder. 1, expect possibility, not limitation. 2, be okay with parenting him differently. And 3, get support. So until next time, parents, always remember that great kids are raised, not born.
Hey, this is Bobby, producer of Meg Meeker's Parenting Great Kids podcast. Thanks for listening, and because of your dedication to raising great kids, Dr. Meg's Parenting Revolution has grown to over 3 million downloads. Head on over to Facebook and Twitter and follow @MegMeekerMD and check out what's new at megmeeker.com. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter to stay updated and get information about giveaways. Don't forget to share the podcast with other parents, subscribe so you won't miss anything, and leave us a review so we know how we're doing.